So welcome everybody to our Future of Cyber panel discussion. Today we have the privilege of hosting a distinguished panel of cybersecurity experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and various facets of the industry. Our discussion will centre around the ever-evolving cybersecurity landscape, the myriad challenges faced by businesses, and the measures to enhance resilience in this digital age. The aim of this panel is not to just inform, but to inspire proactive measures, innovation and collaboration in the realm of cybersecurity. So just before we delve into our core themes, I'd like to ask each panelist just to introduce themselves briefly. So first, we're joined by Scott Goodwin of DigitalXRaid. Scott, could you please just introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Scott Goodwin. I've been around in the cybersecurity industry for 25 plus years now. I started out as a firewall engineer back for an ISP back when I was 19 years old. And then as I've developed my role into more senior positions within large corporate business, I've been a consumer of cybersecurity services for the last probably 15 years of my professional career. I saw a gap in the market, which was why we started DigitalXRaid. DigitalXRaid offers full cybersecurity service portfolio covering audit, compliance consultancy, active testing, 24/7 active defense via our security operations center. And I currently hold the position of COO within DigitalXRaid. So my main responsibilities are looking after the day-to-day operations and delivery and all the delivery of our products and services. But more importantly, I'm responsible for keeping the customers secure.
Perfect, thank you. And Michael, we'll come to you next. Please could you tell us a little bit about yourself and Flexxon?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm Michael Barrett. I'm the UK General Manager at Flexxon. I'm newer into the world of cyber than Scott, for instance. But where I sit with Flexxon is Flexxon are a manufacturer of NAND flash storage solutions that are specifically designed for industrial, medical, automotive, and now in the cyber world as well. And you know, there's a lot of innovation that we're looking at Flexxon and bringing cybersecurity to the hardware level, which is something which hasn't been done before.
Perfect. And Roland, kindly introduce yourself as well and give us a brief overview of ARC's advisory.
Thank you, Rebecca. Actually, it's strategy ARCs.
My apologies.
Hi, everybody. I'm Roland De Silva. My background is that of having spent more than 25 years in management consulting, as well as some time in investment banking. Strategy ARCs Advisory is really a management consulting firm focused on advising corporates, startups, and investors across a number of industry verticals. In the cybersecurity space specifically, work has been focused on strategy, investment, organizational related, transformational initiatives, as well as product and go-to-market related work.
Perfect. And lastly, Kevin, we'd love to hear about your role at the NCC Group and your perspective on this.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks for inviting me. So I'm Kevin Brown. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of NCC Group, which is probably one of the largest and one of the largest pure play cybersecurity companies across the globe. We've got around 2,500 colleagues that work with numerous clients across the globe, offering a full spectrum of services that range from sort of instant response through to red teaming, consultancy, particularly around business transformation, which I'm sure we're going to touch on, right the way through to managed services. From my background, I've been with NCC Group now for coming up for 4 months, so still relatively new. Known about NCC for a number of years, but before that, I managed security both from a CSO perspective, but also ran a security business at one of the largest telcos in the world as well. Prior to that, I was around 20 years in law enforcement, so actually trying to prevent the bad guys and bad people from doing their things has been at the heart of most of my working life.
Perfect. Well, definitely you all bring a wealth of knowledge and experience, a diverse range of experience to this panel. So thank you for your introductions. Now in this panel, there are several key areas that I would like to cover. The first is to establish the current security landscape. So in the renewed digital age, cybersecurity landscape is both thrilling and daunting as well. Rapid advancements in technology, coupled with increased connectivity through the Internet of Things and cloud platforms, have paved the way for boundless opportunities. However, with this evolution, cyber threats have grown in sophistication and volume. Today, cyber attacks are not just isolated incidents, they're persistent and often state-sponsored, targeting not just businesses, but also entire nations' critical infrastructure. So while artificial intelligence and machine learning transforming threat detection and response. They're also arming malicious actors with smarter tools. So as a result, there's a continuous race between innovation and intrusion, emphasizing the paramount importance of a proactive and ever adaptive cybersecurity resilience. So to start this panel, I think I'd like to ask each panelist to describe in their perspective the current state of cybersecurity. So we'll go around in the same order again. So Scott, if you would like to start.
Yeah, so in the context of being connected, like we say, we've never been connected on a scale like this before. You know, it's insane that you're connected to via the internet to a totally remote, unknown person, gang, or individuals that can interact or exploit in your personal and business interests if they're allowed to. I mean, one good thing to say is that what I've seen over the period of starting DigitalXRaid is that organizations and board members are now much more on the ball when it comes to cybersecurity spend. They do know that they need to have people in position for this, and they know that they need to allocate budget. And it is a board level discussion, which when I started this organization, the larger companies and where I came from in large corporate, definitely it was, you know, it was at the top table. But the medium sector and fast growing technology companies that we deal with, they were just focused on delivering service, and security was a bit of a byproduct for them, or a hindrance if something happened. And you had the old, you know, the same objections, oh, it'll never happen to me, all that sort of thing. But I mean, what we see is as well at our end is it's, although there are these, you know, there's complex methods, there's new techniques, there's AI coming along, there's all these things, it's still the basics that we see are prevalent across the industry. So again, if we look at some statistics, ransomware still makes up 68% of all attacks. Yet this is something that was born from a floppy disk in 1989. So 34 years that has held market share for attacks. So again, you know, and again, what we see is phishing, always people trying to use that angle to get in, utilize the employees as an attack vector, and invoice fraud. Still an awful lot of invoice fraud. The amount of times the CEO at my business is telling the finance department to pay for something very urgently, you know, is like on a weekly basis. There's always these emails coming through trying to impersonate people and try and get in through these things. But what I think the main difference that we see today is the ease of entry for organized crime groups. You can buy ransomware now as a service on the dark web. Before, you would need some technical ability. Yes, there was script kiddies and it was a bit of a joke, or, you know, like we look at TalkTalk, one of the biggest and well publicized hacks previously. That was just some kids messing around, found something and exploited it. It's not like that anymore. We do quite a lot of work with local law enforcement, and it is organized crime groups who are seeing an opportunity to leverage easy to procure tools to infiltrate and exploit people, basically. It's much easier than trying to rob someone or, you know, or burgle an house if you can sit in the comfort of your own home and convince someone to execute some programs, or, you know, try and coerce them over a phone call. So I also think as well, there's quite a lot. I mean, you touched on it there. There's a lot of advancement. There's a lot of AI. There's a lot of new tooling. And we've seen a lot of businesses see opportunity to provide new software solutions. And I think a lot of that causes buyer confusion. And you do get, you know, you get this silver bullet approach. Like we always see trends. So a few years ago, Carbon Black was the best XDR product. It wasn't called XDR because there was some other marketing term that they were using at that point. And now we see it's CrowdStrike because they've put a load of money into marketing their product. And the buyer's constantly changing and trying to keep up with these technology paths. And it's very hard because they're having to relearn technology, make sure that they're investing in the right things. And I think that's where it's better to engage a company, a cybersecurity expert company who can guide you on that path so that you get the most efficiency out of the tool set. You ensure that you're either creating the skill set in-house or you're utilizing a company like ourselves to get the most benefit out of the investment. Because I think that's the thing. Although people at the board level are interested in cyber, they want to see what they're getting for the money. You have to show benefit to the board. It's no good. I was a techie, right? And I'll be honest, I used to just want the latest tech. When I was at the forefront of delivering solutions and I was in network security, I wanted the best firewall. I wanted this and I wanted that for my own reasons. But it wasn't always the right thing for the business from a financial perspective. You know, that was my own drive. So I think making sure that yeah, we go out, we buy these tools, we engage these services. It's clear reporting back to the stakeholders with KPIs and measures to say, this is what we've got for our money. These are the attacks that we've prevented. This is the basically insurance policy that we've put in place to protect our organization, and it's working. So, you know, and it's not always a factor of spending money on tooling. The first approach, I believe, is your own employees need to be aware of what these attacks look like and have a way of reporting and championing those individuals to better protect your organization.
Perfect.
Kevin,
Thank you.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to come in, Scott, because I think you hit on such a great point around ease of entry. And I'm not sure whether everyone really understands what's actually happening around entry, because that in itself is now a business. So this year we've seen the rise of the initial access brokers. And it's like, who would have thought in a cyber criminal world would be referring to brokers? So it's no longer a case of, funny enough, I was having a chat with Paul Chichester from the NCSC, who's done a fireside the other night, and we were talking about how cybercrime has changed. And going back sort of, I don't know, 8-9 years, it was quite easy to categorise those that wanted to attack an organisation. It would be, you mentioned Talk, Scott, so your traditional sort of script kiddie, the person in the bedroom with a hoodie. You had your criminals, you had your organised crime groups, and you had terrorists, stroke nation states. See, it was fairly easy. Each had to have their motivation and the tooling to be able to commit the crime. Then we moved into a new era where, as you mentioned there, Scott, tooling as a service, crime as a service, ransomware as a service was available there. You had to have the motivation elsewhere. And now we've got people whose sole job it is to prod, to poke at your organisation with a view to securing access. They're not interested in the egressing the data, to monetizing the data or causing the damage. It's about selling the door that they've opened. And I'm not sure as an industry, everyone is really aware of the significance of that. Coming back to your points around whether you call it basics or hygiene, it's a massive shift. And I think it's quite a worrying thought that there are professionals, all they're doing all day long is knocking on your door, seeing where they can get into, and then selling that openness. And certainly from NCC Group's threat intelligence capability, we've recognised there's at least 200 Russian-backed OCGs that are actively procuring themselves as brokers in this field. So yeah, I think it's a totally different landscape from an ease of access perspective now.
Definitely.
And Michael, did you want to add? Oh, sorry, Scott, you continue.
And like you said, Kevin, there, and they've monetized it, right? Everything gets monetized somehow. So there's a value. So Absolutely. It used to be about data, like you say, now it's point of entry. And it's about, like you say, getting those simple steps and not leaving the door open, because what they're looking for is a cheap and easy route. They're not looking necessarily at the complex, time-consuming, really difficult way into your organization. They're just looking for the people that have not done the basics, not done the housekeeping, and then straight in.
And Michael, did you have something you wanted to add? Yeah,
linking into the entry points that we just talked about, I think also the fact that we've got, distributed workforces now, and we've got, a lot of people working at home or different places, that just makes it even worse. It makes those entry points easier to find. If we were all sat in our office, then we do have a better protection, but we're at home, we're using our own routers. We might have a whole load of different devices that are also attached to that router. So that just increases those entry points that we're talking about.
And I think there's cyber awareness as well of employees. Obviously, the public are becoming more cyber aware, but there's still a limitation there. So somebody might not understand the vulnerabilities of logging onto a public Wi-Fi, taking their laptop on holiday for a few days abroad with their partner, but still working remotely. So I think all of those other aspects kind of come into play as well. Scott, coming back to you quickly before we hop over to Roland.
Yeah, just on that point as well about employees, it's like the analogy with your house, right? You've got the best lock in the world on your door, fantastic lock. But if I leave the door open, it's completely useless. And I think that's what people need to understand, especially from the employee base. You need to use them as a defensive strategy, not slap their wrist if they don't do they fail the phishing training. Make sure you empower them. make sure that they're part of the security makeup. And like you say, through things like security awareness and regular baselining and education.
And Michael, did you want to add something just before coming to Roland?
Yeah, it's just building on that analogy actually that Scott just said. You can have the best locks on the doors, but not even leaving the door open. You can have the key and be happy that you can look at it as encryption. You're all encrypted, but if there's like a social engineering type attack, so effectively someone tricks you into giving you their key, they just walk in and open the door, and it doesn't matter how much security, how many locks you got, but once they've got the key, they're in.
Exactly. And Roland, have you got any comments on the current cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, well, I think nothing really has changed. And what do I mean by that? In the physical world, businesses were in a premises, and thieves tried to get access to the premises. And what really is happening now is everything with digital transformation is moving online, and then it becomes about access. However, where the change is occurring is in the nature of the roles that are being taken on by the bad actors. So in a sense, there is some degree of specialization emerging in terms of bad actors developing their own value chain of specialization, which is important. And I think it's important for both cybersecurity experts and firms to be aware of, because that way they can better counter the threats posed, especially in a world where the surface area of attack is increasing.
Thank you, Roland. And it's definitely an interesting world we live in at the moment, then a lot of transformation, but also a lot of constants, like you said, Roland. Michael, first, I wanted to come back to you. Flexxon deals with high endurance memory and NAND flash storage solutions, as you explained earlier. And obviously, these are crucial components in today's tech infrastructure. So how do storage solutions impact the overall cybersecurity framework of an organization? And what should businesses be wary of?
Yeah, as you rightly point out, Rebecca, memory and data storage are absolutely crucial now, and the demand continues to increase because we're all storing and processing more and more information, and artificial intelligence, things like that are just accelerating that. Coming to the last bit of your question, I think in terms of storage and memory, businesses should be wary of cutting corners really and buying off-the-shelf storage, which is designed for consumer use, not for business use. Now, there are companies, manufacturers that are producing storage solutions. Flexxon is obviously one, but there are others as well that are designed for business use. And if you use that sort of memory and storage, you get much more longevity out of it, which is really important for many businesses. You get better endurance, and you get levels of security that are not present in consumer memory products. But from many recent conversations I've had, I don't think the sourcing of storage solutions is as high up the list of people's priorities as it should. I think quite often people do cut corners and they do go for the cheaper, the cheaper solutions sometimes. But any storage solution sort of sits in the physical layer, and that's where our most, our critical information will be stored or processed. So, it's really important that organizations, take this seriously when they're specifying memory and data storage. And there does need to be better understanding of how to select the right memory and data storage. Because if it's done right, it can increase the effectiveness of your cybersecurity. You're always going to have the software layers that are doing a lot of the work, but if you choose, the right hardware now that has got cybersecurity built in, then you're adding an extra layer of defense, an added layer of defense, which is only a good thing.
I think you raised an interesting point there when it comes to layers. I think there's a lot of layers to not just storage, but cybersecurity in general. So I'm sure that we'll get into that a little bit later. But Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add? I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I was cycling back to the developments really, but I just wanted to mention we've spoke about organizations, but there's also a big increase in individuals being utilized through cybercrime, and particularly through information sharing through social media. Again, we talked about a connected world, but we also overshare now in this connected world, along Facebook and Instagram and all these different things. And I recently, there was a documentary on Netflix showing that they'd set up call centers to target particular individuals, and people were getting exploited for millions. People who were vulnerable or maybe, having a tough time, and then these people were actually being, well, basically held hostage in call centers. This is how bad it was to sort of exploit individuals. So it's not just business. I just wanted to make that point. There is a bigger target of individuals themselves, and everyone needs to be aware. Like you say, the general public need to be aware that these threats are out there, and when they're getting their broadband connection so their kids can play online or whatever it might be, or watch Netflix, they're also opening themselves up to these potential issues, especially if they're part of social networking groups.
And I think as well, bad actors are becoming a lot more clever in that space when they're targeting the public.
Absolutely.
With the emergence of deep fakes and even imitating loved ones' phone numbers. Things like that. So, Roland, I saw your hand up as well, if you wanted to add.
I wanted to pick up on something that Michael talked about. Michael, really highlighted the importance of storage, both for businesses as well as for individuals. Totally agree with all the points he brought up. However, from an enterprise perspective, I think what enterprise also need to consider, especially in a as a service world, is how much they want to allocate for storage and how many copies of their data they want to have in different locations. In a downgraded situation, how many copies of the data are going to be floating about, and whether that would be the best approach, or whether there are other architectures they can have in mind to efficiently manage their budget as well as their storage and cybersecurity needs.
When you come to storage, naturally you're incurring costs, and I've seen, unfortunately, a separation where people will say, well, we're going to keep a backup, we're going to keep some storage, there's an additional cost. Actually, it makes no sense to hold it without actually looking at the risk. What is the risk we're trying to manage? Well, it's one of ransomware, and when you try and flatten out that risk, just try and connect the two to say, well, here's our risk exposure for ransomware. Part of our mitigation and the cost of mitigating it actually is by having some of that storage. You hope, you pray, fingers crossed, that you never have to draw upon that. But ultimately, we know from the statistics that are published daily, ransomware, the average cost of ransomware is increasing day by day. It's crippling many businesses. So therefore, I think organisations just looking holistically at this is really going to help.
And Michael?
Yeah, and this, the other thing is there's so many types of memory and data storage, and like everything else in this area, it's just really important to get advice and go to a trusted partner who can advise it, and also ask the right questions, because you may go there and say, I need X, I think I need X, and a supplier might go, well, there you go. But actually, if by asking the right questions, which I'm sure we all do in our own fields, because we're experts, you can draw out what they really need, and it might be actually different, and you might point them in a different direction, which will give them more security, more endurance. So I think it's really important just to be talking to the right people and making sure they're asking you the right questions.
And just before we move on, Scott, I can see your hand raised as well.
Yeah, just going back to Kevin's point, raised a good point there. I mean, about risk. You definitely need to risk assess your business and the individual parts of it. So if you're storing data, what is that data? Is there a risk of that data? Is it IP to your company? Is it something that could be used for GDPR? Could it cause you some pain? And then there are many blueprints out there that you can follow, risk frameworks. So ISO 27001, look at the NIST frameworks, or if you're a very small organization, you want to cover off the basics, look at Cyber Essentials framework. Or the NCSC have some great checklists and advice that you can follow. Again, but you need to quantify risk. And the first thing about risk is knowing what you've got. You need to understand what it is in your organization, assets, people, and information.
Wise words. Thank you, everyone. And Kevin, just coming back to you. So obviously the NCC Group assesses, develops and manages cyber threats across our increasingly connected society like we've established. But in your experience, what are the most common pitfalls or oversights that businesses make when it comes to their cybersecurity strategies? Or does this differ, for example, depending on the end user, for example, financial institutions in comparison with, critical infrastructure?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And look, having been a CISO myself, responsible for a global organization, it's a tough gig building a strategy for security. So when I talk about pitfall, actually, I'm going to flip this and say, well, what's the positive trends that I've seen first of all? Then I'll go back to perhaps where the challenge is in. Actually, I think we've turned a corner. For too many years, there was, well, this is what security are doing, this is what the business are doing, or this is what the business are doing, but security is holding us back. I think with just the digital explosion that we've seen over the past few years and the need of organizations to introduce new applications, new services digitally to customer, I think security is slowly being embedded in the business. Now, it depends what scale of business you are as to how much that convergence has taken place. But I see that as a really positive. Then coming back to some of the challenges that I see now across all organizations, whether it's a global multinational, whether it's more of a SME-based organization, is really what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve here? If you're sat there thinking, I'm going to protect everything, there's a bit of a rude awakening that's coming. Those days are sadly gone, that ship has sailed. So it comes back to what Scott said earlier as well, is what is it you're seeking to protect? As a business, what is the business outcome you're seeking to achieve? What is the balance that you want to find between your ability to perhaps be innovative, entrepreneurial, move at a slightly quicker pace than your competitor versus how much security you want with that? And depending on what sector you're in will be very different, driven by regulation as well. But coming back to what's at the heart of that is, for you to understand the business outcomes, you need to understand what it is you're seeking to protect. You need to be able to quantify what that is, whether that's in a dollar sign or just at a high level amount. And I think that businesses have still got some way to go to really get into that granular detail to say, this is the business, these are the risks, this is the cyber element of that, and these are the decisions that we can make. We can make the boat go faster on this occasion because actually we need less security. The business outcome we want is we want to be first in the market. And if we get a bit embarrassed because we take a hit or we get breached, our product can sustain that. Or if you're holding personal data, you know that the differentiation that you'll have is being able to demonstrate that you take more care of a consumer's data. So I think really understanding that is absolutely critical. And then the other thing I'll call out is, I think at the moment it's a case of prioritization, which organizations have not quite grappled with. The way that budgeting cycles are working, and just with the sort of macroeconomic pressures that we see throughout the world, at best, budgets are flat. Cybercrime is continuing, but budgets are flat, or in fact, they're decreasing. So therefore, understanding what are you going to prioritize on? You've got limited resources, you've got still a healthy budget, but a slightly reduced budget. So where are you going to prioritize? And of course, that's no longer just about your own organization. What does it mean to your supply chain? And how do you look further into your supply chain? And there was an interesting report released by Department of Science, Innovation and Technology this week, which identified that the prioritization that is given to security by small, medium businesses has dropped from 80% through to 63%. That's quite worrying because many of these organizations are in people's supply chains. So therefore, when you're looking at your organization, if you're a large organization, you're going to have to take almost some paternal responsibility and making sure you're not just flowing down terms and conditions, that actually you're going to do things that are going to help improve the security of your supply chain. So incredibly complex time. And I think prioritization is one that does need some further investment in organizations.
Definitely. And Scott.
I just wanted to say I agree with what a lot of Kevin says there. This is a lot of that is what we see, and I think as we come into there's a global recession, people are holding on to the money. I'll be honest, we found it tough in sales over the last few months because of that. People are holding on projects and things like that, and it's about efficiency and showing benefit. I think that is, like you said, Kevin, I think the two have been separated and they need to be aligned. The security enables the business strategy. That's how it should be. It shouldn't be a blocker. It should be an enabler. This is going to enable us to achieve our goal. And quite rightly, it doesn't mean that they need everything that everybody sells or every, security product. It's on a case by case basis. And like you said, Kevin, completely agree. If it doesn't affect your business, if you have a small loss of data off this server, then look at it in that view. You don't need to waste money there. But if you have got intellectual property, you have got personal identifiable data, which every company has for employees, for instance, then you need to protect those assets, and you're going to have to invest some level of revenue in that. But then on the flip side, make sure that the people that are spending the money, the CISOs, the security engineers, are delivering KPIs, are delivering benefit that you can demonstrate to the board.
Definitely. And Michael, your hand's raised. What would you like to add?
Yeah, I just agree with what Kevin and Scott's saying, but I think what would be really good in terms of security within an organisation is if it was deemed or viewed on the same level as safety. In certain organisations, in certain industries, obviously safety is incredibly important, and it's almost like a given. And if we could get security to that level and to that importance, then that would make a massive difference and would raise awareness, obviously, massively within the organisation, and that would help with the issues we see with a lot of attacks being due to human error. And if individuals were more aware of that would naturally help to cut some of that out.
Thank you. And lastly, for this section, the term zero trust has obviously been gaining traction recently in market over the past couple of years or so. How is this concept reshaping the way the businesses think about their cybersecurity frameworks? Perhaps Roland, you would like to give your insight first?
When we think of zero trust security, basically we're thinking of a framework that assumes that no user or device can be trusted by default. Now, this is really a departure from traditional security models, which have relied on a perimeter-based approach where users and devices are trusted once they have successfully authenticated to the network. Now, in today's world, zero trust frameworks are gaining traction because businesses are looking to improve their cybersecurity in the face of increasing threats as well as the increasing surface area referred to earlier. The question here becomes, first, do the organizations have the culture of security built in? Because if you're going to not trust any individual or device, what effectively you're doing is introducing more layers of security. How does that affect the user experience or the employee experience in this case? Does it create dissatisfaction, or does it become an excuse for not doing work? I think what organizations need to first do before even looking at zero trust is understand where their key assets are, figure out how they want to protect those assets, what would be the right architecture, technical architecture, and how are they going to layer a security strategy on top of that, and then deploy zero trust as appropriate.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything to add in terms of zero trust?
Yeah, I can sort of just add to that. I think, look, zero trust is a word that's been around for considerable years. It's moved from the original zero trust to zero trust 2.0 because the original zero trust concept had introduced too much friction into the end user experience. And we all know that if there is friction introduced at the end user experience, what does it equal? Shadow IT. People will start to bypass systems. So I think that when you take on the principles of zero trust, you're not going to trust, it's least privileged across the estate. A mindset that when you do look at your architecture, you're managing a breached environment from minute one. Don't take a starting point that I've got a beautiful, safe environment. It has to be you're managing a compromised estate. But really think about that end user experience. And I can't emphasize that enough, because if you're a user, whether you're in an organization, you're working from home, whether in the business, and you want to be able to reach those applications, those services, how can you make it that security is very seamless, it's very frictionless from that? And sort of throw into the mix then the zero trust as the principles was set out. And then obviously we went into the pandemic as people were having their journey to the cloud. We came out of the pandemic where people are now inherited, organizations have found themselves in this hybrid multi-cloud environment where there's been a lot of fragmentation. So I've seen many organizations, and certainly we're working with a number of organizations to step back and say, what is the architecture? What is the principles that you want to place? But more importantly, how do you get the visibility that you need to properly manage that? And when I say manage it, manage it from both a threat perspective, but also a cost perspective as well, given some of the challenges in the sort of spending side of things. That's just a few thoughts from me.
No, agreed. And I think the user experience is a trend that is, especially last year and this year, coming into focus in all sides of security, and changing that perspective that security is very much, both physical and cyber, is very much, the big revolving door, the big security camera in your face, and it is becoming a lot more seamless, and giving back to that experience of the user, I think, is quite important as well. Roland, I just saw your hand pop up as well. Have you got something to add?
Yeah, I think in the current context where we have the emergence of the hybrid worker, that would be a good environment where you want to apply zero trust, because they are accessing corporate resources from different servers, from different devices, from different locations. They're always on the move. So it could be a good setting. I think zero trust also has a bit of a way to travel before it becomes massively adopted. I see it potentially being massively adopted when we have quantum computing. And I think zero trust is the emergence of that preparation for quantum computing.
And I think you're right in terms of there's a lot of businesses now that are not even just doing the hybrid format, but are fully remote, and they're hiring people remotely, they're interviewing remotely. And in that instance, you don't necessarily always know the person behind the screen. So to adopt that kind of approach in that sort of scenario can obviously be beneficial to an organization as well. Scott, I saw your hand pop up as well. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so the zero trust, I think if we move away from the technology, but the ethos of it, I think if you say that and you say, oh, we're going to zero trust, then it's a good way of looking at it, right? Especially when you talk about what Kevin said, where we're transitioning to cloud, and we're utilizing a lot of SaaS products. Now we see that way back when I was in, we were looking at cloud, people were scared of cloud. So it was really scary, and we were going to lose all our assets and control, and these people we didn't know were going to look after our data and all this sort of stuff. And now we've come around to that fact that that's okay and acceptable, and there's, like you said, legal things in place, But the fact of the matter is, you parking your car in someone else's garage, you still are. So if you do, if you think of it like that, then yeah, I shouldn't trust those networks. I shouldn't trust those devices. And possibly I shouldn't trust, like Kevin said, the supply chain. I shouldn't trust those third-party developers that I'm employing to do some work on those devices. And if you look at it from that viewpoint, then you will put the layers of security in. Yes, you're not going to stop them doing their day job. You don't want to impact business. So you're not going to make your third-party developer go through 67 chains of authentication and you only get an hour of productivity out of him. But definitely you need to be, it's a mindset. I like the mindset of zero trust. The technology implementation is a different thing, but if you think of it as a mindset, yeah, we don't trust that network, we don't trust those individuals, then it gets you thinking about risk, and maybe then you'll think of the scenario that you could play out.
No, it's an interesting debate, and I think there's enough use cases and warrants for it in a number of businesses, and also what Kevin said, in a number of other businesses, you need that trust, you need that reliance on your employees. So I think it's a matter of environment. Kevin, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I'm just going to come back to that. There's a phrase that I found myself using and certainly resonates across the NCC Group. It's people-powered, tech-enabled. So I think we've gone through, and if you look at AI at the moment and generative AI, we're on the height, and we're on actually down coming on to the sort of the depths of disillusion at the moment. Let's not forget the role of the human in this. Believe it or not, we still have a role, and it's just around actually how do we bring together that human and the tech. The tech is the enablement. It's not the end. It's not the end and be all end of it. It's around the role, the connectedness between the human and the tech. And I think, as Scott identified, that culture sits in the middle of that.
Well, thank you. And just another question for the whole panel as well. Could you all provide some advisory tips, maybe perhaps, for businesses looking to improve their cyber resilience? I don't know whether Kevin, you wanted to continue.
Yeah, I think on that, cyber resilience has to start with being really clear as a business what it is, what the outcomes are, and then we can go into a whole raft of things. But once you understand where you want to be as a business, what are the basics? What are the basics? Knowing your estate, knowing your assets, knowing your supply chain, and having a patching policy. If you can nail those, I think you're halfway there. So there's a lot more that you can move on to, but I think those initial steps, there's still some work to do.
Thank you. And Michael, you haven't spoken for a little while, so do you want to shed some light on some tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think things to look at are, I think it needs to be a more holistic approach. That security is designed in from the start and is, not an afterthought. A phrase that's being used quite a lot, which we talk about, is security by design. So it's really being, when you're building something, security is, paramount when you're going through that process. I think, as we talked, starting to look at hardware-based cybersecurity as well as an added layer of security. The more layers, the better. But as I say, that's where your data resides. So I think that will really help. We talked about AI, and I think AI used in the right way is going to help as well, because it can reduce human error, because it can reduce some of the human intervention that's having to be made at the moment, which often leads to error. And we talked about it already. I think Kevin mentioned originally, and that's around the vendor risks. I think be really important as people do start looking at some vendor risk management and understanding, the chance of supply chain attacks down the line and going down into the vendors, because even very large organizations, somewhere along the line, they'll be dealing with they'll have much smaller organizations attached to them. And with platforms like LinkedIn and whatever, it's a lot easier now to research and find, if you're a bad actor, it's a lot easier to research and find those people that you might want to try and get to eventually get up into the main company. And so many companies that are feeding into a main company have access to their systems in different ways, and it's all been done to make life easier, so that orders can be put on onto the customer system, etc. But that does mean that a lot of different people and a lot of different places have got access to these systems. So yeah, I think the whole world of vendor risk management is really important.
Thank you. And Scott, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd echo some of Kevin's comments, to be fair. I think you've got to align strategy with your strategic goals, like we've said a few times on this call, to then show value. There's a number of frameworks out there that you can follow. There's a lot of free information about embedding security. And I think the main thing is make sure that you have someone responsible for security within your organization as well, so that you're not getting what we see sometimes in the tech startups we work with, you've got the server guy who's now the security guy, and he's really not skilled in that way, and he's doing the best he can, and the guy's a great guy, but he's not really the security engineer, he's not really the security strategist, and looking at it from a holistic point of view that a CISO or or even a company like ourselves, if we went and did a maturity assessment, for instance, we would look at it from a high level and look at it across all tiers. The technical guy is just looking at the tech and looking at securing the tech, but there's a bigger picture, like you say. There's the humans, there's the people, there's the technology, there's the whole business strategy, and that's where you need to start.
Thank you. And Roland, any tips to improve cyber resilience?
Yeah, well, if I had to advise a business on cyber resilience, the first question I would ask them is, have you conducted a risk assessment? Have you identified where your most critical assets and threats are and where the greatest risks are posed? Because that ultimately is going to help them prioritize their security efforts. The second thing would be what is your security strategy and how is it implemented? Is it layered? Because no single solution is a silver bullet. The third thing is how well informed, conscious, and trained are your employees? Because people tend to be the weakest link, as has been mentioned earlier. And last, but well, I would say second last, I would say, do you have a plan for responding to incidents? Many companies don't have a plan in place to respond to incidents. No matter how good your security is, there's always a chance your organization will be attacked. So having a plan to respond efficiently and effectively is critical. And then depending on the nature of your business, meaning if you have heavy reliance on the cloud or you have a large number of IoT devices, appropriate investment needs to be made based on the business context and focus. And all businesses, irrespective of where they are, need to invest in training their staff on phishing and others, common cybersecurity topics.
Thank you, Roland. And I think that we have another session at Security Buy Live this year titled, I've got 99 problems, but they only need one. And it's very true to highlight what you said, ransomware attacks and, any kind of attack, whether it's phishing or whatever, is so common. It's so commonplace nowadays in any size businesses, whether you're a large corporate or an SME. So having that preparedness for what to do if and when that might happen is might be a key as well. And Kevin, lastly, did you want anything to add?
I think there's a lot being said there. Picking up on your last point, things about that preparedness. You don't have to do a lot other than the fact of what actually are you going to do? Do you want to wait for it to happen to respond, or do you have things like incident response retainers, or do you have an organisation that will come in and manage it for you? I manage quite a large global incident response team, and it still astonishes me that the volume that the team are pretty much utilised 100% of the time, but I always break it down to those that have a relationship and that had a retainer in place versus those that are phoned up 24/7 and just asked for help. And it's astonishing. It's still a too high a number that says, help, I'm in this now. So this preparedness, I think, is absolutely critical to and it's also a mindset shift as well, to say that it's not a case of sort of if we're going to get hit. It's, as we know, it's a when, it's a timing thing. So shifting that mindset up front, shifting the culture up front to say, look, all businesses are being attacked. It's just how we're going to deal with it and the consequence of it.
And I think it's applying that same mindset and, like I said, culture that we do to so many other aspects of our lives, both personal and professional. I mean, you get in your car, you drive down the road, and you know that if you break down, you've got insurance to come and pick you up and tow you. So why not apply that same ethos to your cybersecurity? Anyway, moving on to our final section. So now that we've established obviously where the industry is in terms of the current landscape, and obviously given some advisory tips into what and how businesses can best prepare themselves, it's time to look forward to the primary discussion point of this panel, the future of cybersecurity. And the future obviously is poised to be quite a dynamic blend of cutting edge technologies and evolved strategies as the world becomes more interconnected with the proliferation, it's a bit of a mouthful that one, of IoT devices, artificial intelligence, and the expansion of 5G networks as well. The surface for potential attacks grows exponentially. And as cyber attacks become more sophisticated, collaborations across industries and nations will also be essential. The emphasis will shift from mere defense, like we've said, to proactive threat hunting, with organizations investing not only in advanced tools, but also in cultivating a culture of cybersecurity awareness, like you've just said, Kevin. So Roland, I'm going to come to you again first. What do you see as the most pressing cybersecurity challenge that organizations will face, and how should they prepare that?
Well, I would highlight a few. Number one, let's look at what's happening. The rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning is not only creating opportunity for innovative startups to come up with cybersecurity solutions, but is also enabling the bad actors to come up with worse threats than before. So that's a double-edged sword there. There's an increasing sophistication in the ransomware attacks, partly due to AI, partly due to the fact that we have organizations at different stages of growth, some with very legacy type infrastructure and systems, the growing surface area attack of the cloud, the increasing number of connected devices, IoT and others, the shortage of cybersecurity skills. These are all, factors that I think we are going to see coming up again and again. And also, if you allow me, there would be, other things that we need to look at in terms of developments, such as quantum safe cryptography, and how that will enable cybersecurity in the future. IoT and edge security. How is security at the edge going to evolve? How is 5G security going to evolve, especially with the rollout of 5G networks by telecom companies? Supply chain security, as some have mentioned, continues to be a concern. So vendor risk management is going to become much more critical. Rather than facing the problem downstream, address it upstream. And then I think we're going to see more developments on privacy regulations. We're going to see more developments around workforce development due to the skill shortage currently being faced in the cybersecurity space. And let's not forget nation-state threats. They will persist and impacting not only governments, but private sector as governments and corporations battle for intellectual capital.
And Scott, just to hover quickly on that, on the AI point that kind of Roland mentioned, obviously AI is kind of transforming all kinds of security, both physical and cyber at the moment, and in our personal and professional lives. As digital transformation accelerates, what role do you see AI and machine learning playing in cybersecurity solutions?
I think we have to harness AI in defense. We have to, because if the threat actors are utilizing it, the AI can crunch numbers better than any human. It's a fact. They can do things faster. They can learn certain patterns faster. But I think the focus for us is to make sure that we've got individuals trained and skilled in utilizing AI, because it's one thing having it, and then it's another thing wielding it. It's, the analogy, you can get in an F1 car, but I ain't going to win the championship. Yeah, it's and I think that's going to be the challenge for security companies like ourselves, is getting that skill set, getting people up to speed and utilizing the tools that become available and staying ahead of the threats. Is it going to be something that a larger organization can achieve as well, who is not security focused? Probably not in the short term without a hell of a lot of investment. And I think, that's where Kevin and myself and the rest of the panel, where our security expertise really flies, is that we've got a team of experts who are seeing this in multiple industry disciplines across multiple size organizations, and we've got the knowledge that we can guide you through this what could be a real advancement in how the attack chain works, in the utilization of tooling. AI is amazing, right? I use it a lot. I ask it questions, and you get an instant response. And I watched something recently. I'm trying not to go on, Rebecca, but
no.
I watched something recently on Netflix, and they taught AI how to be a fighter pilot in 9 months, and it was beating the Top Gun candidate from the American Top Gun equivalent. If you can teach it to be a fighter pilot in 9 months, you can teach it to be a competent ethical hacker. Well, not an ethical hacker, but a non-ethical or ethical hacker in probably a short space of time. So it is going to happen. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. No, I think AI is a tool that can hugely progress all industries and also harm it. Like Roland said earlier, it's a double-edged sword. And I think we've got the new AI Act coming in to Europe and hopefully wider as well, which will put responsibility not just on the end user and its application, but also the manufacturer. And that kind of brings us on to our next point, where convergence is becoming quite a key trend when it comes to security systems. Kevin, just before I go on, I see your hand raised. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to just pick up on the AI point, because AI has been around for considerable years, but obviously it's been thrust into the limelight and into boardrooms because of generative AI. And that's why it's become a topic, because actually AI has become accessible to all because of the generative bit, the chat GPTs. And I think it's been fascinating to chat to many peers across the industry around what are your organizations doing. So generative AI has raced to the boardroom like nothing that's ever been seen before. Nothing to do with security, but more about, if we don't use generative AI, are we being left behind as a business? Security will have to mop up the pieces in it. But I think why it's quite interesting from a security perspective is no one really actually knows what we're doing. Break generative AI down. You've got the generative, the bot, you've got the large language models, you've got the data. And in fact, our chief scientist at NCC Group gave evidence at Parliament only 2 weeks ago around large language models and perhaps what government should be doing. So I think it's going to be certainly an interesting year as to what is the right security, depending on what sector you're in and regulatory oversight you have in relation to how that plays out. And what we have to be minded, we can't sit and ponder this for too long, because we all sit here in the confidence, actually the baddies have worked out their strategy. They're not worried about the regulation. They're not worried about who they upset. They're not worried about whether it will displace colleagues in their business. They're going to be using it. So we do have to be really clear where we're going to use it. I think Michael alluded to it and how it best helps our ecosystem as well.
Thank you. And hopping back to convergence, Michael, I'm going to come to you for this one. Physical and digital worlds converging. How do you see the role of convergence in physical security solutions, for example, shaping the cybersecurity landscape?
Unmute myself, it always helps. I think, as I said, physical security is becoming more important. The software-based approaches work on the whole, but they have to scan such a massive area. The external layers that they're looking in are just huge, and there's so many things that they're trying to look for and trying to find to cut those attacks out. Whereas at the physical level, it's much simpler. It's a much more controlled environment. The attack area is smaller. And actually, it makes the use of AI in that environment easier, because it can be a smaller model. It's not got to look at so many different things. So it's easier to detect threats. And again, it should be another layer. And if I could use maybe an analogy to try and explain what I'm saying, if, for instance, a criminal's coming into the UK, a wanted criminal, the external layers where the software operates is like trying to find that person in the baggage hall. They could have disguise, they could even have changed their physical appearance, and you're just looking around for them. There's so many variables, and it's really hard to spot them. But the physical layer, the hardware-based approach, is more like when they get to passport control, and actually not just passport control we have now, but say a biometric passport control. So there's only one way through. They've got to go through that point. And if you're relying on just checking a few key, very low-level biometrics, you can't hide from that. The person, their eye is still the same, or whatever, whatever biometric you want to use. So, it is on that basis at the physical level, it is easier to detect things, because, it's a more level playing field. There's not as many sort of things and variations to check. So that's, I think, why innovation in this area is going to become increasingly important. I don't think there's enough of it at the moment, but certainly, at Flexxon, we're working hard to do that with the cyber secure SSD that does works along the lines we're talking about. And I'm sure there'll be more innovation, because at the moment in the physical level, you've pretty much just got key management and encryption. And as we talked earlier, encryption is fine, but if someone gets hold of the key to your door, then the encryption's undone just like that. So I think we need to be looking at at increasing levels of physical security now.
Definitely.
But I think what we're finding is it's hard work getting people to that place. I think everyone's comfortable with how things work and software, and it's just trying to educate people that there's not another way, it's an additional way. It's not, instead of, it's as well as.
Definitely. And just one final question to everyone to finish off this panel. How are cybersecurity manufacturers innovating in this area at the moment to either combat the challenges that we've spoken about, or kind of add value to the digital age, or to ensure, you know, data security at the storage level? I don't know whether I'll go around the room, so perhaps Kevin, you'd like to start?
Yeah, I think there is innovation, but coming back to it is, are organisations ready for it? So I think this is actually, as an organisation, how are you approaching this? How do you see it? Because we've often seen the case that tech has come out, but actually business change has not gone with that, whether that's a process perspective, also whether it's a funding perspective as well. Sometimes software and physical, yes, they're getting closer, but they have attracted different funding cycles, different budget holders. So I think there's good progress being made. Obviously, you've got massive issues around the OT side, where you've got big physical things that, believe it or not, have a cyber aspect to them. So I think good progress. I think it's around user education, user adoption that's going to be the difference, and businesses understanding, going back to what we said at the start of this, is actually, what is your strategy, where you want to invest, because you need to know where you're going to want to protect.
Thank you. And Scott, would you like to follow up?
I think that manufacturers need to be very clear on the problem that they're solving. I think sometimes that's quite blurred with the marketing literature and the bells and whistles and dashboards that they promote. I think clear indication of this solves this particular problem, and don't fluff it up that it's a silver bullet, because there's no such thing. And be very clear to organisations what they're getting back for their money, really. Because again, like I keep saying, you've got to show benefit for the spend. Spend is going up. People are holding on to their finances a lot more tightly now, and you've got to show value. So being able to demonstrate that problem-solving nature is key, and that's exactly what, you know, we try and do with our products. We're always trying to solve a problem.
I suppose it can always be a little bit difficult to demonstrate what it can prevent if, you know, you're asking for a large, you know, attack to happen, to prove, you know, that it's preventable. So yeah, it's juggling.
It is difficult. I think, you know, like, and I'm sure Kevin will sympathise with this as well. When you're trying to sell or put in a SOC service, for instance, you're trying to showcase the service and people. It's the people, not necessarily the technology. I'm not, the fancy dashboard or whatever is not the main aspect here. It's the handling of an investigation. It's the handling of an incident, and dealing with that is really the showcase. And that comes from, again, like we said, people are the important piece here. The people in front of the technology and the people processing, going through the processes, or the incident response piece, delivering the incident response is the bit that we're showcasing, and it's not always visible to the end client.
And Roland, have you got anything to add?
I guess a lot has been touched on security by design. You know, there are things that manufacturers need to consider, such as, what is the purpose of the device they're manufacturing? Is it going to be online or offline? How will firmware updates be done, over the air or otherwise? How will they encrypt sensitive data for the users? How will they implement, you know, strong authorization and authentication mechanisms? And how will they be able to monitor threats for the use of the device as a service or otherwise? So again, it's difficult to give a single answer. It really depends on the context and usage of what they're manufacturing, and you know, how it will be deployed in a real life setting.
Definitely. And lastly, coming to you, Michael.
Well, as Scott said, you know, it's got to solve a problem, but it's also got to be easy to use for the user, and easy to implement, because, you know, it could solve the best problem in the world, but if it's not that usable and it's not easy to implement, then it's not going anywhere. So those sort of three have got to come together.
Thank you. Well, I think that's all we have time for, but I wanted to thank you all for offering your insights into this keynote panel on cybersecurity. Your knowledge and expertise in this field is invaluable. And if anybody has any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and connect with our panelists on the platform and continue this conversation. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rebecca.